So Nick Baker is the director of the Lovett Pinetum, a nonprofit arboretum located near Springfield, Missouri, specializing in conifers. He came to the Pinetum in 2012 after working for 12 years in Florida as a director of horticulture for Bach Tower Gardens, a National Historic Landmark and one of the nation's oldest public gardens. He has been a frequent horticulture speaker, including speaking at the Epcot Flower and Garden Festival at Walt Disney World, and is passionate about communicating how trees enrich our personal lives and our communities, and the role of public gardens and arboreta in providing a resource for that message. Nick holds a bachelor's degree in horticulture from Oklahoma State University and an MPA from the University of Missouri. He resides in Springfield with his wife and their three daughters. And the Arboretum is rather spectacular, and Nick welcomes visitors. It's definitely worth going to if you're ever in Springfield or Kansas City area. They're not too far from each other. So thank you, Nick. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Like I said, my name is Nick Baker. I just want to talk to y'all. I know some of y'all are familiar with us, and some of y'all probably knew our founder, but I'll just give you a pretty brief history of the Pinetum and then of the cone collection and how it came to be. So we are a 108-acre arboretum near Springfield, Missouri. We were founded by Robert Lovett, who was a longtime member active with the American Conifer Society, and he just had a real enthusiasm for conifers, and he started back in the 1970s planting pine trees on the original part of our property, which is only about 14 acres. And that was and there's a natural spring there. And then in 2007, well, in 1997, he incorporated all of it as a nonprofit. And then in 2007, we began buying property on the other side of the road from the original part of the Pinetum. We have another natural spring and a part of a creek that runs through here. And that eventually we got up to our 108 acres today. We have about 3,500 accession trees in the collection. Up until recently, we had mostly focused on species conifers, but over the last 4 years, we've been working on a cultivar garden. So now we have about 150 different species, and I think it's about 150 to 200 cultivars in our cultivar garden now that we've kind of added as the center of the arboretum. So that's just kind of a brief history of the Pinetum. Bob passed away 4 years ago, but he's left behind a foundation for us to continue, and we're slowly kind of working to get more broadly open. We are open by appointment. If any of you are ever in the area, I encourage you to reach out. We'd love to have you and show you the Pinetum. So onto the cone collection. Shortly after Bob passed, a man named Richard Bond, who had also been a member of the American Conifer Society for a number of years, judging by the copies of the quarterly that I found and the stuff that he gave me, he reached out about he was moving and he had some cones. Bob had done a cone collecting trip in the late 90s, and he actually left some cones with Richard in Arizona, and he was needing to get rid of this stuff, and so wanted to know if Bob still wanted these cones. But Bob had passed away at that point. But I got to talking to Richard, and he had this massive cone collection that had been acquired over the last 30 or 40 years. Richard was a plant biologist. His wife was a botanist doing systematic botany, and they had traveled over quite a bit of the world doing collections for some of her work. And so he had this extensive cone collection, kind of loosely documented, but he had all the species, of what everything was, and had, all in these boxes. And he was looking for a home, for it, and not getting a lot of takers. I guess it wasn't documented enough, for kind of true research organizations, but we were happy to take it. And so I talked to Richard about it, and he ended up giving this collection. I flew out to Arizona and rented a U-Haul truck, and I packed 40 boxes of cones into the back of that truck and drove them back here. And kind of that's where they've been. And I've been loosely sorting through them, and really just recently completed that initial sort. And that's kind of what you see behind me today. We've tried to sort everything, by species, and where we have information, kind of sorted out a little further by where and when it was collected. So it's a fascinating collection. There's cones from all over the world. In this collection, we have about 300 something species of different conifers that we have cones represented here. The largest part of that is the pines, and I wrote it down. We have about 120 species of pine in the collection, and 30 species of fir. One of the most unusual, we have 20 species of Calitris. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with Calitris. It's Australian, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, maybe a little bit, but I think mostly Australian. But that's kind of an unusual conifer. You can't grow it a lot of places, so kind of neat to have some of those cones as well. They're pretty small. Um, so yeah, it's we're using it as a tool. We do get educational groups out here, and so I'm able to show the kids some of these different cones. It's a great resource for us in terms of being able to show some of these things that we can't grow. We have our collection, but of course, as everybody's kind of limited in what they can grow. I mean, we're able to do 140 different species, but uh, we're probably kind of hitting up against our ceiling in terms of the number of species that we can reliably grow here. And so it's just great to be able to have some of these other different things to be able to show, further show that kind of diversity of conifers and the diversity of the trees in our world. And it's been a big hit with the kids, and I hope you like it today. My plan for today is really just to kind of I've laid a few of these out, maybe 20 of the ones that I think are really neat and interesting. I think we all maybe gravitate towards those really large cones. They're kind of fascinating, but even some of the small ones can have just really neat details, and they're really interesting. So with that, I'm just going to go through and show you some of these, and hopefully y'all can see the details of them pretty well, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all might have throughout or at the end. So I think we'll start with some of the big ones here. And a lot of you all are probably familiar with these, but I never get tired of seeing them. So this is, and I held this one up earlier, this is the sugar pine. This is Pinus lambertiana. Grows out in California. We can't really grow these here. We've tried, and maybe we can one day there. I haven't quite given up hope on this one, but we have trouble with a lot of the Western conifers. But what I really like about some of these really large cones for the kids is that you can, and I don't know if you'll be able to see the details or not. I'll kind of try to get it in there, maybe, maybe not. But what I show the kids is when you have these large cones, you can see very clearly where those seeds sat. You can see the imprint of the seed, you can see the imprint of the wing still there on the cone. So that's just kind of a neat a lesson for them to be able to kind of see how these work and really get an understanding of how these open and to disperse their seeds. So that's the sugar pine, and I've got several of these, and just a really really fascinating cone. So, and I may be off on and off camera a little while as I grab some of these. Second one I'll show you is another California pine. This is coulter pine, Pinus coulteri. Um, and just always the lesson I tell the kids when I'm showing these too is that tree size and cone size are just totally unrelated. The sugar pine is the largest pine tree in the world, and but the coulter pines are pretty average as pines go, maybe even a little short, so not much of a big tree at all. Coulter pines they make these big, big, heavy cones, and I'll show you one here in a second that didn't open, and you can kind of really see the difference. But these are just fascinating cones, a lot of resin, also very, very, very sharp, and I don't even kind of quite see those. You have to handle these with care. They've gotten me a few times, but that's just a really, really fascinating species. It's kind of a neat piece to just have sitting out somewhere for showing these big, big, big cones. And let me grab that unopened one. So this was a coulter pine that never opened. So it sat in the tree, and it fell off before it ever opened. So it's still got the weight of all those seeds and all that resin inside. So kind of a neat tool to be able to show the different phases of that cone. So very similar to the coulter pine, just a little smaller, is another California pine. I'm very jealous of California and their pine cones. This is the gray pine, Pinus sabiniana, and it's just a slightly smaller version of coulter. Still very very sharp, but a very 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 large. interesting cone. So can everybody see these okay? This is just kind of holding them up and letting y'all see.
We see them pretty
Okay.
good, I think, at my end.
Yeah, good. So, but not to be outdone, not all the big cones are in California. This is from longleaf pine. This is a Pinus palustris longleaf pine, grows down in Florida and through the southeastern United States. So people in the eastern United States might be a little more familiar with this one, but you don't always think of longleaf pine as having these great big cones, and not all of them are. There can be a lot of diversity in size on some of these, but so kind of your more kind of standard pine cone, but just much bigger than what you usually see. So So our collection also here includes a number of these of the Mexican pines, and these you really don't see a lot because many of them aren't hardy. Even the ones that are hardy have trouble with the disease issues in much of the United States. This is let me make sure I'm getting the name right. There's two that look kind of the same. This is Pinus michoacana, and I apologize, I'm not sure of the actual common name for this one, but this is one of the Mexican pines. And they make some of these kind of large cones too. This one, you often see that kind of bend in it. They all seem to grow that way.
Chris, we have one question now, which might
Yeah.
be great for you to answer early here.
Sure.
Suzanne asked, what do you recommend to preserve these cones in such great shape?
So, it really depends. Pines really don't need a whole lot. They need to be kept dry. They need to be kept free from rodents. Ideally, if you're keeping them in a box, they won't. If you keep them out, they tend to get a little dust settled on them. But I don't think it really hurts them. We've had some sitting out a long time, and they have to be kind of blown off and cleaned and every now and then if you're doing that. But the pine cones don't require a lot, and any of these kind of woody cones, a lot of them don't take much at all. I'll show you a little later some of the fir cones. So cones, some cones just open and that's it, and that's kind of all they do. Some cones are a little softer tissue, so like the fir cones shatter. So they don't stay together once they release their seed. They release their seed by shattering. And there are some that do that. Taxodium is kind of the same way. So you've either got to collect them before they open, and you got to find one that's got a lot of resin that will hold it together. Or some of these larger fir cones, and I'll show you one here in a little bit. We've actually taken a hairnet. You kind of put it over it, and that will hold it together. But they really don't need a whole lot to be preserved. They kept dry, and and keep them away from rodents or anything that kind of get in them. Insects is kind of a problem. He had done. The guy that collected these I think had bagged a lot of them just to make sure that all the insects were killed first. And so, if you're going to be collecting cones and bringing them in to where you have other cone collections, it's important to get any kind of any kind of insect out of there that's going to eat them or chew on them. So, and that you can do a lot of ways. You can just, put it in a plastic bag and just heat treat it, but just anything to get whatever might be eating them out of it. But once you've done that, they really preserve, pretty well. So, let me check. This is another Mexican pine. This is Pinus maximartinezii, and this one you can see is really, really thick scales. Can you see that? Can you get it up there? These are really, really thick pieces. Unlike what you see on some of the others. So that's kind of what makes this one distinct and interesting. It just this one to me is almost sculptural. It just almost looks kind of unreal. It's like somebody's carving of a pine cone, rather than being a real pine cone. But I assure you it is, but another really, really interesting cone, and one you're not going to see a whole lot, and which is this the kind of the fascinating part of having this collection here. Let's see. Oh. This is a cone that makes a tree that makes a pretty large cone. So, not as large as some of these others, but pretty large and interesting looking. And this tree will grow through a lot of the United States. So this is a Pinus strobiformis. So it's the southwestern white pine. You start looking at these long enough, you can kind of really see pretty distinct difference between the white and yellow pine cones. This just kind of has that kind of more typical structure of a white pine cone, but we are able to grow these. I don't get a lot of cones on ours, and certainly our cones are not this big. I think they grow much larger in their natural environment. But we are able to grow this tree, and I think if you lived in a place that had maybe slightly less moisture than we do, you could grow this tree and probably get kind of pretty interesting cones. But this tree has a much wider range, and so yeah, I'm gonna be looking for ours and seeing if I can ever get some to make some of these really big cones, because it'd be nice to be able to have some of these big cones that grew here, but no luck yet. But that's Pinus strobiformis. This one's kind of neat to me too, because of that kind of the tip of that scale kind of recurves down, kind of an interesting way.
So do you have those growing on your property there, right?
We have Pinus strobiformis growing here. These cones didn't come from that,
Right.
and ours have made some cones, but they look a lot more like your typical kind of Pinus strobus,
And
the white pine cone. They're not hugely different, from those.
right. And how big are those trees now?
So the strobiformis that we've had, that was part of Bob's original plantings. So those we've had since some of those since the 70s or 80s. So they're pretty good sized trees. They're maybe 30, 40 feet tall. All right, so moving on from the pines, kind of pulled out some of the more interesting things. And this one I've got to handle with care. So this is this is Abies procera. So this is I'm not great with the common names, folks. I apologize. Should have looked these up. But I believe this is I'm not even going to guess, but Abies procera. And I don't know if I can get it close if you can see. It's really hard to see. Well, yeah, maybe you can kind of see. Can you see that hairnet over it? So these will shatter, and you can see, there's a good example. So see, that was the cone. There was another cone on this, but all the scales had shattered off of it. And that's typical of the fir. They tend to want to do that. So you can put we use these, they're just classic hairnets. I ordered new ones, but the packaging I think was designed in the 50s. They haven't changed it at all. And it does really, really well. You can kind of slip it over there and it kind of holds that on together. People will also use a glue to try to kind of hold some of these together. And we've got some in the collection that have been done that way. And also people will wire them. And I've got some representatives of another cone that I'll show you in a minute that has been preserved that way. But fir cones, these hairnets tend to work pretty well. You can kind of put it over there and kind of tighten it. You can kind of see like this one is trying to shatter. I don't know if you can kind of see that movement inside of that. So this one, it's loose inside of there, but that hairnet has helped us to kind of preserve that shape so that we can use it, and hopefully we'll get a lot of these out on display soon. So this is something you're never really going to see anywhere. This is agathis. So this is a conifer, but it grows in the tropics. It's not hardy anywhere that I know of in the United States. but a tropical conifer. But you can see the wiring on this, and you can see here's one that was partially shattered, and so the bottom is kind of holding together. Like I say, sometimes they have a little resin in there to keep them together. But if you leave these untreated, they will just open up and shatter. So this one, he had taken and kind of wired together with some thin wire to kind of hold that structure together. This is Agathis robusta. So just another kind of the diversity just fascinates me. But then you take all these kind of different types of cones, but then when you really start looking at them, you can see that kind of at their core they are similar structures. Let's see. Tried to kind of pick some things that you just don't see everywhere. This is from a conifer called Petaleria. This is kind of a tropical, subtropical conifer. It grows in China. We had a site in Texas for a while, and we were able to grow these sorta. We would lose them about every 4 or 5 years. It seemed like a freeze would come along. They would grow up pretty quick and neat. But these have a little more of a classic pine structure. So they look like a pine cone, but they're kind of loose, kind of soft, but kind of interesting. These have almost more of a floral look to me, but don't grow in a lot of places in the United States. Keteleria, there's several different species. I think this one was Eveliniana. Yeah, this one's Eveliniana, and there's Davidiana and Fortunii. So if you live someplace pretty warm, an interesting one to try. But it's just kind of this really kind of neat. It's like a delicate looking pine cone is what it looks like to me. So just another interesting one. Let's see. Another one that some of y'all might be able to grow. I haven't had a lot of luck getting one to size, but this is the Sciadopitys, the umbrella pine. So, which is just an interesting tree in general for a conifer, but it also makes this kind of interesting cone. But this one doesn't shatter, so it holds itself together pretty well. So just kind of a neat. It reminds me of the Keteleria a little bit in its structure. Really, one of my favorites that's not a large cone. This is from the giant sequoia. And I think these just have fascinating kind of structure to them. Again, one that holds together really well. And this is one I really use for the education groups for kids. It's to show I'll hold up one of those coulter pines, and then I'll hold up one of these and ask them which one is from the largest tree in the world. And I get about half and half. Some take the bait and they say it's the big coulter pine, but then others know I'm trying to trick them. But I think these just have really, really interesting structure to them. And to think this is the largest tree in the world with these tiny seeds, just a really, really interesting cone. And certainly not one you're going to see everywhere. Just another one. You kind of see the diversity in some of these structures. Cedar cones, Cedrus. This is the true cedar. These I like because they hold together better than the fir, but they have that kind of papery feel of fir cones. If you've ever handled a lot of fir cones, they shatter, but they've kind of got that softer, papery structure. And the Cedrus are similar. It almost looks like kind of layers of paper. I don't know if I can get there closely. Yeah, I can kind of get a good look at that. almost looks like kind of like layers of paper stacked on each other. But still, all the kind of pieces are there. You can see the scales, and you can see the seed coming all out of them. This is one that didn't open. So that's a nice way to really preserve cedar cones well, get them slightly before they open, and they hold together pretty nice and tend not to open up on you. But but even once they open, they're still, yeah, pretty interesting.
Do those have a lot of resin on them or sap to keep them stuck together?
They don't feel like they do, but I assume they must kind of inside. When you get some of the fir cones that are really holding themselves together, you can almost kind of feel that resin in there if you kind of get them before they open. But you can't 100% rely on that resin to hold it together. For the fir cones, the cedar, they don't seem to come apart. The fir over time, if they got dry enough or warm enough, they probably would release and go ahead and open up and shatter. So you're best to kind of wrap something around them to try to preserve it. Okay. A couple of other interesting ones in the collection. This is from Araucaria heterophylla, the Norfolk Island pine. As best I know, I'm pretty sure on that one. You didn't have good labels. If one of you knows better than me, I'd be happy to be corrected on some of these. But it's definitely an Araucaria. But these kind of really interesting cones. It's just kind of like a big egg looking shape. And this one looks like it's not opened. I don't think, but I do have some I think that are opened, but they don't open a lot. Yeah, here's another R car. You can kind of see it's kind of beginning to open there, but it just kind of barely starts to crack, and then it's kind of come open, but doesn't seem to want to come apart. This one in my right hand is from a cycas. I actually think this is a male cone from the cycads, that I've seen. The female cones look a little different, and I lived in Florida for a number of years, and so we grew some of the cycads. They didn't reliably comb for us, but they would put on the male cones, and some of them would make seed, but the female ones tended to seem like they kind of opened up. And I don't think I've actually got any of those. They would kind of open up and kind of lay their seed out on the ground. But my Florida days were before I was really into conifers. I was kind of came when I started doing this, but another fascinating kind of a structure from some of these plants. So from the cycas. This last one I have to be very careful with. This is a big favorite with everybody I've ever shown it to. This is from Araucaria araucana. So another Araucaria, grow in like South America, but can be grown in some parts of the United States. But just make these, kind of great big, cones. I always say it's like, I don't know, just they almost look hairy, but they've just got these kind of long, kind of ends on these scales of this cone. But again, kind of all the structures there. This is part of the leaves, still attached. So this one's actually still probably attached to some of the branches. Very sharp, so which is why you see me being kind of delicate with these, so I don't slice myself open. This is definitely one of everybody's favorites that we see here. So pretty interesting stuff. So. All right, I know that was pretty quick, but that was the main ones that I pulled out to yeah, I got myself a little bit to show y'all with regards to some of these. Like I say, I really just tried to represent some of the diversity of the collection. We have a number of um, Cupressus species as well, and and then we've even got a lot of different junipers as well. I didn't dig them out; they're not much to look at. If you've seen an eastern red cedar, cone, kind of the little berries, well, most of the junipers, I think we've got like 30 different species of juniper, but they pretty much look like that. But still, I think it's kind of a neat collection to have and really kind of show off the diversity of some of these things that you've got this group of trees that uh, have all the same kind of, in theory, kind of same structure, for creating their seed, but there's such huge diversity in the size and the appearance and kind of how everything looks like. I just think they're fascinating, and everybody gets a chance to see them is fascinating. So I'm glad to be able to kind of get to show y'all some of them. And as you're ever in the Springfield area, reach out. I'd be happy to show you the Arboretum and happy to show anybody the cone collection in more detail. It's
Can you take some more questions now?
yeah, I will take some more questions for
Oh,
sure.
great. Okay. So what about New Zealand conifers? Do you have anything in the collection from New Zealand?
The only thing I don't know how far some of these calitrius that I have, I don't know if they get into New Zealand or not. They definitely get into Australia, and so we do have several species of calitrius. I don't think I have a whole lot of the New Zealand conifers. I don't know that I've got any, per se. If they tell me something specifically, I might know, but I imagine I would think the calitrius would go to there, but no, I don't think his travels took him there a whole lot. So.
Okay. And then this is a really good question, I think. What can you do to educate us about male and female cones? Is there an instance where some cones are both male and female, or are all cones male and female? Like, what do we need to know about that?
So cones are all male and female with the conifers. So everything will produce male cones and female cones. The cones that we're all familiar with and the cones that I'm showing you are all the female cones, with the exception of the cycads. Cycads kind of makes them larger kind of male cones, but the male cones tend to be pretty nondescript. They don't last. They're really only this thing that kind of pops out and produces pollen. So they're pretty small. The tree will make a lot of them. And then, like if you don't know how these are formed, some cones, and I couldn't reliably tell you which ones are which, but some cones form in one growing season, some take two, and I think some take as much as three. And so what they'll do is they'll come out kind of like again, you have to imagine this is at obviously, macro scale, but they'll come out, the cones will form and they'll be kind of small, like say a small version of the final cone, but they'll be tight, kind of like this. And then what happens is that those female cones open slightly, and then the male cones release their pollen. The conifers are all wind pollinated, so that pollen then settles inside of those cracks in the female cone, and then once that cone is fertilized, it closes back up, and then it produces the seed and matures. And then once the seed is mature, then it will open up and it will disperse its seed. And so typically you see cones produced high up on the tree, and because the seeds, and I don't know if I've got any of these that got some seed laying around. Give me 1 second. Yeah, there you go. This is a coulter pine seed. So they're produced way up in the tree, and this one's wing is a little ratty, but you can kind of see this seed. There, you kind of see the seed here, and then they'll have a little wing on there. So they produced up in the tree. Some do. The ones that, are kind of wind dispersed, they'll open like that, and then they'll release their seed. Now, some, particularly ones that tend to shatter, sometimes their seed is dispersed in other ways, like the bald cypress, the taxodium. They tend to shatter, but they kind of rely on water to do a lot of their disbursement of seed. Then, they kind of grow near the water. So they shatter, they go in the water, and, the wing that's kind of attached, or that piece of scale that's attached, will help it float and disperse itself. But a lot of these that grow up in there will have that little wing attached, it lets them kind of catch on the wind and kind of blow further away, where they can, have a
Okay.
chance to kind of disperse a little bit and then grow. So, but, so yeah,
Well,
that's,
Arboretum has a couple of questions. I'm asking them if they can unmute. If they can, they could ask them directly, but it's about accepting donations from other institutions and also how you organize all these sessions.
okay. I'm sorry. What's the question?
The first part of it would be, do you accept cone donations from other institutions? And how do you organize all these sessions?
So the cone collection is kind of a new thing for us. I think we would accept cones, from other institutions for sure. But we really just began this with this one donation from Richard Bond. And so we've been how we're attempting to sort. So I went through kind of initial sort, just kind of sort them by species. But the idea is to go through and catalog these where we have obviously by species, but our accessions would be based not only on species, but like where this cone came from. Hopefully we would know, like, oh, it came from this cone was collected at this spot, and that would be ideal for us to have as much information as possible, like where that cone was collected, and just to kind of be thorough. It's kind of one thing to have the species, but that's kind of how we're organizing it, and that's how we organize our plant collections. We track the species, but we track individual accessions based on when they were acquired and from where, and different things like that. So we may have multiple accessions of the same species. We It's just sorted right now. We are going to catalog it, and we have a database where we keep all of our information about our living collection. And what I'm hoping to do is talk with our database people and get it where we have a section of that we can utilize for this collection as well, to keep it to keep that kind of same information in the same place in the same database, but also distinct from the living collection.
Great.
Here's another question. What can we do I hope I didn't cut anybody off, did I?
No, that was just me.
Okay. Here's a question, and I know a few people want to know about this. Is there anything we can do to encourage larger cones or more cones on the trees that we're growing in our collections? Or is that just an expression of health?
Yeah, it's mostly just an expression of health and suitability to the area. Not everything in our collection, even some of these things we've had a long time, makes, reliable cones. It can take a number of years to produce cones, and then, some won't end up setting seed, and they won't fully mature the cone unless they can set the seed. And so if you're growing some things that are, not native in the area, then you may not get reliable cone set because they're not really getting pollinated properly, or whatever. There's just a lot of different factors, going on, but a lot of it factors into health. And although, I will say, sometimes you'll see a tree do things like, and not just conifers, they'll when they're struggling, they'll do a big seed set, because it's kind of an initial, it's kind of I think a survival reaction. It's like, whoa, I'm dying. So something triggers inside the plant, and so it tries to produce as much as it can. But yeah, I haven't found there's anything you can really do to kind of encourage it. A lot of it's just about suitability to your area, and kind of whether it's going to grow and produce or not. So, although they do, sun is a big deal, because, as I say, these produce at the top of the tree mostly. And I know when we've done seed collecting, for trying to grow things here as part of our living collection, we've got to look pretty high up in the tree, or we've got to find exposed kind of sunny areas. So they tend not produce if they're overshaded.
Best way to get sap off your hands?
Best way to get sap off your hands? Oh, the best way is not to get it on there. But no, I don't have any tips for that. Just soap and scrubbing, maybe a little gasoline, but you may not want to try that.
Gasoline works for everything. The Yellowstone people also would like to know where you get your storage boxes. the ones
Oh,
that you have behind you.
yeah, these, I had to kind of track these down. I actually bought them off of Uline. It's just a company that does they do all kinds of different things for manufacturers, whatever. And these are actually gift boxes. Like, if you were running a retail operation, where you could buy these boxes, and they come in a huge variety of sizes. These were my favorite ones that I found, and I looked at a lot of different boxes. And so, I've got some that are kind of 6x6. I've got some that are in a 6x12. So I've kind of got some different sizes. And then for the larger cones, they came in these banker boxes that the guy was storing them in, and that's about the only thing I found for containing those. But Uline is where I bought all these little brown boxes, and they're really just gift boxes meant for retail. But they come in a variety of sizes, and they're working really well for us.
So Nick, Jeff and I were there a couple summers ago, and I think you recently had gotten the collection and you had all those boxes in the room, and you're not showing the side of the room with all the boxes. So how many do you still have to unpack?
I just finished. They're unpacked.
Oh,
So
good.
I'm not showing it because they're gone. So I've been chipping away at it, and we made a big push over the last few weeks to kind of get through it. And so we've been able to do that initial sort. And the way I got these was like 40 something boxes is with just, there might be, 50 species inside of one box. And so I started trying to catalog it from the outset and quickly realized that that was not going to work. I just needed to get an initial sort done. And so now I've got them here on the shelves, and they're sorted by genus and then by species, so that, when I'm looking for something, we can go right to it, more or less. And now we can take them species by species and begin the cataloging.
We might want to mention that you can meet Nick, hopefully, probably in person at the Rock Island National Meeting.
We are planning on being there. I've been coming to the last few, and I always try to bring some of my staff, and it hasn't worked out, but I hope to have myself and some of my staff there this summer.
That'd be great. I'm sure you're going to have a zillion people want to meet you and ask questions.
I'd be happy to. So.
So a lot of people are saying thanks for the excellent presentation, and they're excited that you're going to be the cone collection for us. And people say rubbing alcohol works for removing sap.
Okay.
This person said that they had sap in their hair and they used baking soda.
Huh.
I can say I used coconut oil myself. Thank you. Lots of thank yous. Anybody else have any questions? You could.
Hope everybody enjoyed it, and it's fun to be able to have it in a place where we can show it off. And if y'all ever in the area, come see it in person.
Great. Somebody unmuted and put their screen on. Do you have questions for Nick?
No, I just wanted to talk with you when you close out.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other things? Okay. Well, thank you, Nick, for joining us. Jeff had to run to something else he's in the middle of. So he thanks you also. So hope to see you in June, and everybody else in June also.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody.